Arrival at Velrith Prime. Dr. Elara Vance adjusted the collar of her uniform as the diplomatic shuttle descended through the amber clouds of Velrith Prime. From orbit, the planet shimmered with silver rivers and deep green plains. Now, closer, she could see the crystalline towers of the capital city, Yevtheril, glowing like a field of bioluminescent coral. She had trained her whole life for this. Xenoanthropology, interspecies diplomacy, cultural immersion. She had translated ancient Velrithian poetry and lectured on non-terrestrial sociological norms. But none of that had prepared her for the reality of the Council's directive. All foreign delegates must comply with Velrithian Law 47, no exceptions. Law 47 required total disrobing upon entering a truth chamber, the sacred space where Velrithians conducted all official negotiations. Clothing was considered a physical barrier to trust. Transparency, to them, was literal. The moment she stepped off the shuttle and into the warm, slightly humid air, a tall figure awaited her. Ambassador Thalen of the Velrithian High Circle. He was humanoid in form, but taller, his skin a pale shade of violet with an opalescent sheen. His eyes, a deep silver, reflected the sunlight with an almost mirror-like clarity. Dr. Elara Vance, he said, bowing slightly. Welcome to Velrith Prime. The Council awaits your presence in the Chamber of Accord. His voice was calm, melodic, but not mechanical. Despite his alien features, his tone radiated something unmistakably human, empathy. Ambassador Thalen, she replied, inclining her head. I'm honored to represent Earth. They walked side by side through a garden of glistening flora. Strange, star-shaped leaves curled gently as they passed, as if acknowledging them. The Truth Chamber ceremony, Thalen said after a long pause, has been known to cause discomfort to outsiders. That's an understatement, Elara muttered, before catching herself. Apologies. It's just, we have different norms. Where I come from, nudity in official spaces is considered taboo. Intimate, even invasive. I understand, Thalen said, stopping by an archway carved from translucent stone. But here, concealment suggests deceit. Law 47 was enacted long ago, after a war where lies clothed in ceremony nearly destroyed our world. Since then, truth has been honored by the shedding of all pretense, physical and otherwise. She looked at the entrance. It shimmered faintly, guarded by two ceremonial sentinels in minimal armor. Beyond it lay the chamber, and beyond that, a room full of Velrithian officials expecting her to bear herself, literally, for diplomacy. You don't wear much, she noted, eyeing Thalen's thin ceremonial robes. He looked down at his garments, as though seeing them for the first time. For us, even this is considered reserved. I wear it only to ease your transition. A small alcove nearby held a changing area, empty and quiet. Elara stood at its threshold, her hands shaking slightly. She had faced countless challenges. Arctic surveys on Europa, flame storms on Mercury's moon, the acidic winds of Velrith 4. But this felt different. Not dangerous exactly, just exposed in a way she hadn't prepared for. She turned to Thalen. If I refuse, what happens? Then the Council will interpret it as unwillingness to speak truthfully. The talks would likely end before they begin. He paused. But I will not force you. Elara closed her eyes. She breathed deeply, grounding herself in logic, in purpose. She hadn't come to Velrith Prime to impose Earth's values. She had come to understand another world, and maybe, in doing so, help it understand hers. She stepped into the alcove. The fabric of her uniform whispered as she peeled it away. Layer by layer, she let go. Her boots, her calm cuff, even the earth medallion at her throat. Each piece placed gently into the waiting drawer. She emerged, chin high, heart racing. Naked, the guards bowed. Not leered, not smirked. Bowed. Thalen didn't look away. But neither did he objectify. His gaze held hers, level, steady, and warm. There was no shame in his eyes. Only acknowledgement. Respect. You are ready, he said softly. And for the first time since landing, Elara believed it. She stepped into the truth chamber, unclothed but not unguarded, vulnerable but unbroken. Tomorrow, the negotiations would begin. But today, she had already taken the first step toward truth, the undressing and the unexpected compassion. Elara stood still in the center of the truth chamber, surrounded by half a dozen Velrithian officials seated in a wide circle of transparent stone. The room glowed faintly with a soothing cyan hue emanating from the crystalline walls and floor. Everything was designed to reflect and refract light. Nothing hidden, nothing shaded. That was the point. She could feel their gazes on her body. She resisted the urge to cross her arms or shift her stance. Her skin prickled from the subtle shift in temperature, but her spine stayed straight. No one spoke at first. Silence in Velrithian custom was sacred at the start of any negotiation, an acknowledgement of presence before words. Ambassador Thalen stepped forward, clothed only in his thin, ceremonial sash. He carried himself with effortless grace. His silver eyes scanned the circle, then turned to Elara. She comes from a world where exposure is vulnerability, he said. Yet she stands before us by choice. Let her be heard. A hum of approval echoed through the chamber, a musical resonance, not applause. Elara swallowed the lump in her throat and stepped forward. "I understand your laws," she began. Her voice trembled, but found strength in the stillness. "But I won't pretend this wasn't difficult. Where I come from, nudity is personal, sacred in a different way. We don't associate it with honesty. We associate it with intimacy. And yet here I stand, because truth is worth discomfort, and because understanding another culture begins with humility." She exhaled. The silence lingered, not as judgment, but as reflection. Thalen turned toward her. "And that is why you were chosen. You sought not to challenge our customs, but to understand them. That is our first bridge." He stepped closer, not intrusively, but with deliberate calm. He extended his hand, not to touch, but to offer support. Elara didn't move. She expected to feel exposed, even shamed. Instead, there was a strange kind of serenity settling into her. The way the officials regarded her, not with hunger, not with pity, but as someone who had made a meaningful offering, unsettled her more than scorn would have. Thalen's eyes met hers again. In them, she saw no dominance, no embarrassment, just clarity. "The body tells no lies," he said, "and yet the heart can still ache beneath it. You honor us by bringing both." The chamber doors closed silently behind her as she was led to the negotiation platform. A thin, soft pad waited for her to sit. It was oddly comforting. There was no sense of urgency, no bureaucracy, just presence. As the discussion began, translation protocols, trade standards, linguistic guidelines, Elara found herself oddly unburdened. There was no artifice here, no power posturing or jargon-laced threats like on Earth. The Velrithians debated with composure and curiosity, sometimes even gentle disagreement that ended with shared laughter. It was the most honest diplomacy she'd ever witnessed. But it was during the recess that something shifted. Thalen approached quietly, carrying a dark indigo robe made of fine, flowing fabric. Without a word, he held it out to her. Elara blinked. "I thought garments aren't allowed in the chamber." "They are not," he said. "But this is not law. This is kindness. You have shown truth. You have earned comfort." She hesitated, then accepted the robe, draping it around her shoulders. The material was warm, almost like a second skin. They sat side by side near a narrow pool of reflective liquid, part architecture, part ritual. The chamber was empty now, the officials having left for adjournment. "Why did you help me?" she asked quietly. Thalen tilted his head. "Because courage deserves acknowledgement. You did not surrender your values. You met ours halfway. That is a rare gift." "Do you think your people will trust mine?" she asked. "I think they already trust you. And through you, perhaps they'll learn to trust humanity." They sat in silence, the chamber's glow dimming with the passing cycle. Elara felt a strange warmth beside him. Not romantic, not yet, but deeply human. A moment of connection, unmarred by politics or tension. And it all began with that first step into vulnerability. When she finally stood to leave, Thalen rose with her. He didn't bow this time. He simply looked at her, steady and calm. "You are not what we expected, Elara Vance." She smiled faintly. "Neither are you. The crisis and the choice." The second day of negotiations began with promise, but ended in chaos. Dr. Elara Vance sat in the truth chamber beside Thalen, newly robed in the indigo cloth gifted to her. She had earned the right, Thalen had explained, to wear it as a symbol of trust, both given and received. As she listened to the deliberations on trade routes and shared communication protocols, she allowed herself a flicker of hope. Perhaps humanity could learn to walk openly in alien spaces. Perhaps this time, diplomacy would not collapse under pride. Then, the second delegation arrived. Ambassador Nathan Griggs of Earth's Interplanetary Alliance strode into the chamber with the confidence of a man used to getting his way. He was flanked by aides, each stiff in regulation Navy uniforms, each eyeing the translucent walls with visible discomfort. Elara rose to greet them, but her warning glance at Griggs came too late. "What the hell is this?" Griggs said, stopping at the chamber's threshold. He looked around, his eyes locking onto the Velrithian officials in their minimal garments, then turning sharply to Elara. "You didn't tell us they were serious about this undressing nonsense." "It's not nonsense," Elara said evenly. "It's law, and a sign of respect." Griggs snorted. "We don't bow to primitive rituals. You really think stripping down in front of a bunch of aliens is diplomacy? It's submission." A hushed ripple moved through the chamber. The Velrithian council members did not speak, but their stillness was a statement in itself. Thalen stepped forward, voice steady but colder than Elara had ever heard. "Ambassador Griggs, by entering this space clothed, you bring the implication of concealment. By calling our custom nonsense, you dishonor not only our law, but the risk your colleague took to honor it." Griggs smirked. "Well, maybe someone needs to remind you that Earth doesn't kneel to anyone." Elara felt the air shift, subtle but sharp. The Velrithians didn't raise their voices, but the glow of the walls dimmed. Disappointment settled over the chamber like a shadow. She stepped forward, placing herself between Griggs and Thalen. "Nathan, please. This isn't about dominance. It's about respect. Just let me speak with the council alone. You can wait outside." Griggs turned away. "You deal with the naked aliens, then. I'll be filing a report to Central Command." The chamber doors closed behind him with a heavy finality. Elara turned slowly, heart thudding. Every pair of alien eyes rested on her. She hadn't worn her fear before, but now it threatened to rise. "I'm sorry," she said. "He does not speak for all of Earth." Thalen said nothing. Neither did the others. The silence now felt like a verdict. "If you'll allow me," she said louder now, "I would return to the center." No one objected. She stepped into the open again. Slowly, she removed the indigo robe and let it fall to the floor. Her skin met the filtered air of the chamber, and she stood just as she had on the first day, bare, vulnerable, and unafraid. "I will not let his pride destroy what we've built. You asked for truth. Here is mine. On Earth, we wear clothes to shield our bodies, yes, but also to shield our emotions, our shame, our fear. Here, you ask us to remove more than just fabric. You ask us to be seen. I accept that. And I ask you to see not just me, but all of humanity as it might become." Thalen approached her slowly. He said nothing until he reached her side. "Then, you speak for more than one world, Elara Vance. You speak for the future." He turned to the others. "Let it be recorded that despite violation of Law 47 by one of her kind, this human chose truth again. Not because she was commanded, but because she believed." A new sound filled the chamber. Not the approving hum of earlier, but something richer. A melodic convergence of tones, like a harmonic choir rising from the walls themselves. The council members stood, one by one. A tall woman in silvery robes stepped forward and placed a glowing pendant at Elara's feet. "The veil of trust," she said. "No outsider has worn it in 3 centuries." Thalen bent to retrieve it, lifting the pendant and offering it to Elara. "Then let her be the first." And in that moment, Elara understood. Diplomacy wasn't about words or treaties or winning arguments. It was about standing unguarded in the space between worlds and being willing to be changed. The accord and the connection. The signing ceremony took place in the Garden of Reflections, a sacred space not used since the Velrithian Unity Pact over a century ago. Long pools of liquid glass ran through the garden's center, surrounded by living crystal trees that pulsed softly with ambient light. The stillness here was different from the solemn quiet of the truth chamber. This was the silence of beginnings. Dr. Elara Vance stood between two worlds, clothed once more in the indigo robe she had earned, the veil of trust pendant resting lightly at her collarbone. Across from her stood Thalen, dressed not in ceremonial garb but in a simple sash, an unexpected gesture of humility. Behind him, members of the Velrithian Council waited with dignified stillness. On her side stood the remaining members of Earth's diplomatic team, those who had stayed after Ambassador Grigg's dramatic departure. They looked to her now, uncertain but trusting. She was no longer just an observer or interpreter. She had become a bridge. Thalen stepped forward and extended the treaty crystal, a multifaceted prism that would bear the neural signatures of both species' representatives. A living record of truth, encoded in thought and intent. "Shall we?" he said. Elara nodded and reached out. Her fingertips brushed the crystal surface, and a warm hum passed between them. Not sound, not light, but something deeper. A resonance. As her thoughts flowed into the device, she spoke. In recognition of shared truth, of earned trust, and of mutual growth, I sign on behalf of Earth. Thalen followed, placing his hand alongside hers. In honor of courage, of cultural humility, and of bonds unspoken, I sign for Velrith Prime. The prism flared momentarily with iridescent light, acknowledging the pact. The council members bowed as one, and Elara felt something settle in her chest. Not pride, not relief, something quieter, something like peace. After the ceremony, the council dispersed, leaving her alone in the garden's soft twilight. She found Thalen standing beneath one of the crystalline trees, its limbs swaying gently despite the still air. He did not speak as she approached, and she didn't fill the silence. They simply stood for a while, watching their reflections ripple across the liquid glass. "You've given my people something I didn't know they needed," he said at last, a way to remember their own origins. When our ancestors first created the truth chamber, it wasn't for law. It was for healing, for reconnection after war. Elara looked at him, seeing not just an ambassador, but a man shaped by the weight of tradition. And now, we remember that truth requires vulnerability from both sides. They walked slowly along the path of glowing stones, their steps sinking without effort. As they passed under a flowering arc of light-laced vines, Elara stopped. "You never asked why I came," she said. Thalen tilted his head. "To represent Earth? No, I mean why I came. Why I chose this over the easier path. The lectures, the policy board, staying safe." He waited. "My father was a diplomat. He always said that real diplomacy didn't happen in conference rooms. It happened in moments. The pause before you speak, the decision to listen, the choice to stand still instead of stepping away." She exhaled. "I didn't understand him until I stood in your chamber. Naked and afraid, and still welcomed." Thalen's gaze softened. "Then perhaps your father understood us better than most of his kind ever will." They reached a quiet alcove where a low bench curved beneath a flowering vine canopy. Thalen sat, then motioned gently beside him. She joined him, and for a while, they watched as twilight deepened into the soft, bioluminescent glow of Velrith's night. "You know," Elara said with a smile, "we don't usually fall for ambassadors from other worlds." Thalen raised an eyebrow. "Ah, a shame. We are apparently quite charming." She laughed. It felt good. Real, grounded human. He didn't take her hand. He didn't need to. The space between them was full of something better than romance. Respect. A connection built not from attraction, but from trust. As the stars above began to blink into view, Thalen spoke one last time. "In your honesty, Elara Vance, you've shown more than truth. You've shown humanity. And this time, She let the silence linger,